Hello friends and welcome back. In this video we are going to see on how to handle these kind of errors. For example, let's say that users are coming into your application and they are trying to log in and they leave the username blank and the password blank. In that case, those will be called the model state validation errors in terms of API, and you need to notify the users exactly what they are doing wrong so as to be able to provide them with exactly what they can correct so as to be able to meet the requirements. And as you are seeing in here, we are getting these kind of errors. We're getting the status code as 400 and we're getting these errors as an object of arrays. And we need to format these into the way that can be consumed by our client, and we will be also providing the way to handle these kind of errors. Alright, enough of talking. And again, these model state validation errors are coming now from this API controller, and this API controller is the one that is doing that automatically, and by default it gives this behavior that we are seeing in this postman. And there is a way we can override the default and we can give the specific behavior that we need, and that's what we are going to do inside this video. And before we do that, again, whenever you go back here and you try to comment this API controller like this one and you try to save, after saving this and you go back to the postman and you try to send the request again, you can see that in this case you're not getting anything. You can see that it is giving this 200 okay, even though we made a bad request. And that is now the power of this API controller to check what you give it, and it can demonstrate whether we made a mistake or not. That's why it is now performing a tremendous job in here. We need to bring this back in and save and make sure we get back the error that we were getting so we can start from there. Alright, so in order to do this, first of all we need to add the API validation error response class, and then we will see on how to add some of the behavior options into the program.cs. I'm going to minimize this and I want you to be with me and you see on how we set these. I'm going to go back into my errors and I'm going to create a new class, and I'm going to call this as API validation error response and press enter. And in this case we're going to derive from the API response, and after deriving from this API response you can see that it is now bringing this error because we don't have a constructor with empty parameters. I'm going to generate a constructor in here, and in this case I'm going to generate this one, but we don't need any of these, as we know that we are going to be getting the body request for error response of 400. We are going to provide it here. Remember that all of these will set as now, and there is no problem to leave them blank and put in now the error response that we need. And after creating this, we need to create now the IEnumerable property that will help us to catch the errors. I'm going to say plop, press enter, and this will have a type of IEnumerable, and it will be a type of string, of course, and I'm going to call these as errors. Alright, after doing this, as I was talking about overriding the behavior for this now API controller, we are going to do this inside our program.cs file. So I'm going to go into the program.cs, and you need to add these as now a service. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say builder.services, and I'm going to say configure, and inside this configure I'm going to say that I'm going to use API behavior options, and I'm going to say that I'm going to call this as opt, and I'm going to use this allow, and I'm going to go down here and put in some curly bracket, and now we can access now the invalid model state response factory. So I'm going to say opt dot invalid model state response factory. I'm going to choose this one, and I'm going to say that this will be equal to action context, and I'm going to add another arrow, and I'm going to go down here, and in this case now we can access now the model state. So I'm going to say var errors that will be equal to action context, and I'm going to say that dot model state. Down here I'm going now to add the link expression, and the link expression that I'm going to add here will help us to select exactly what we need. And we'll have to check if we have the errors first, and after selecting that we have the errors, we would have to choose exactly what we need from those errors instead of returning everything. So I'm going to say I'm going to add the dot, and I'm going to say where. And the reason I add the dot here is because I don't want this to be long, and I'm going to use the where, and inside the where I'm going to say e goes to e dot value dot errors dot count, and you need to make sure that this is greater than 0. Once this is greater than 0, we're going to go ahead and select many, and inside here I'm going to say x goes to x dot value dot errors dot error. And after doing this again, we need to use the select, and I'm going to say x goes to x goes to x dot error message. And here we made a mistake, we need to add this, and here we need to say that x goes to x dot error message. That's the reason why it wasn't working these like this. And we need to bring this to array because we're having this as an enumerable. We need to return that, and we need to make this as an array. After doing all of these, we need to go ahead and say var, and we need to create an instance of API validation error response, and I'm going to call this as error response, and I'm going to say new API validation error response, and I'm going to pass in the parameters, and we need to take the errors, and is going to be equal to errors. And after all of this, I'm going to add this semicolon here, and we need to return now the new body request object result, and I'm going to pass in now the error response, and I'm going to end this like this one. And we have to check whenever we have these errors, and we need to add this semicolon so as to be able to remove all those red lines. And now we are set. It's now time to test and see if now this is working, and I can advise you to restart the server as we made a lot of changes. And I'm going to restart this again, and we have to test if the changes are now populated. Alright, so I'm going to go inside this, and whenever we send the request, we expect to see more detailed response more than this. I'm going to go ahead and click on send, and in this case you can see that we're getting these errors as an array, and we're getting the status code and also the message. And in this case, you can see that this is more cleaner than the previous one, and we have to put in some effort so as to be able to return this response as a meaningful response that can be consumed by the clients. I hope you have fun by doing this, and thanks for being with me in this video. And in the next video, I don't know if you noticed it, but this program.cs is now trying to be big, and whenever we add the other things, it can be a hair of a maze of error of code, and it can be very hard to know where you put exactly all the necessary things. And you're going to see on how to make the extension of these so as to be able to have a clean program.cs class. So see you there, and stay cool.